now, Neil, go ahead.
I'll be very brief. Thank you, Chris, again for an excellent workshop seminar. And thanks to the presenters. I think the diversity of the presenters shows how integrated sustainability is. I'll be very brief. In terms of water, one of the things that I haven't seen in the sustainability discussion is the use of permeable surfaces, which would save hundreds of millions of dollars in the city. The products are being made out of recycled materials that are available, and we need a specification to allow it in the district. In terms of solid waste, Hana used the word inconsistency, which is absolutely correct in terms of this policy. I'll be a bit more dramatic and say pay-as-you-throw. Pay-as-you-throw can achieve as much diversion as an incinerator, and it costs nothing. It costs changing the rules. The expenditure on the incinerator, $300,000 life cycle analysis of an incinerator is just a joke. It's been done 10 times before. Jeff Morris, Sound Resource Management. It's a complete waste of money. And the city can't afford it. There's no place for it. So spending a dime on it is quite silly. In terms of food, one of the key things that we're finding, and Brenda Platt, my colleague, will be issuing a report momentarily, small-scale composting leads to value added and the best jobs, more than $20 an hour. And the city, to the credit of this program put out by the mayor, they are allocating $600,000 for community-based composting. I haven't been able to find out how that planning is going, and since there are, maybe I can touch base with you if you know, that would be great. But that's a key, not only for getting food, but for good jobs and, of course, teaching nutrition. In terms of jobs, as the last presenter made, it's obviously critical. And I'm going to bet that you pay more than minimum wage to your workers.
Every employee starts at living wage in my company.
Great. And that's the point. We get reports at the Institute of so many sustainable jobs. But when you go to Los Angeles, and Atlanta, and many other cities, all the recyclers along the conveyor belt are getting paid minimum wage, temporary jobs. They're being treated like serfs. You can't count those as green jobs because they're not sustainable. They're poverty wages. And the last thing I'll say, we didn't get to it in this panel, not your fault, but the city is also about to spend $100,000 on investigating broadband. It's already been done. It's outrageous that they would choose $100,000 to study something that they should be implementing. That's a shame, too. Last thing I will say is that in terms of pay-as-you-throw, it's such a no-brainer. You can get to 50% almost within a year. It's happened in many, many cities. And here I'm going to call the mayor something like the Pope in terms of sustainability. As you know, if you follow these things, the Catholic Church is against abortion, and it's also against exploiting workers. The problem is it spends 99.9% of its time and energy focused on abortion and .whatever% on creating fair and decent economies. The mayor has to have really focused with how the money is being spent. I just identified about $400,000 that will be wasted. The $600,000 for composting could be a tremendous asset to the food network, etc., if it's spent right. So I would agree with the last gentleman. We've got the money. We need folks like you looking over the shoulder of these folks to make sure, the city folks, to make sure the money gets spent right. Thank you.
Anyone on the panel need to say anything?
One more thing I was going to say. The Sustainable Energy Utility Advisory Board meeting, the next one's April 8th at BDOE's office from 10 to noon. These are open to the public, and I really encourage that the environmental community get very involved finding out how these programs are going, because they're in here now. We don't have to wait for a plan. They're being done, so let's see how they're doing.
Okay.
Chris, I'm going to leave these charts with showing the tremendous advantage over recycling versus incineration in terms of jobs.
Okay.
And there are only a few, but if you want them, we'd be happy to get them around, give them to everyone. I think Larry Martin worked on this years ago. Thank you very much.
Hannah, I'm sorry, Hannah wanted to say something real quick. Go ahead.
Sorry, just one point on pay-as-you-throw. I mean, what Neil said is exactly right, and I do also want to note that the working group recommended a 3-track collection system and incentives by 2018, which, again, it's unclear what the short, medium, long term is that the city is proposing. But it seems they would fall somewhere in between short and medium term. But pay as you throw and kind of 3-track waste collection system that the plan is proposing is actually for the long term. So this is again concerning because it is something that is implementable and it doesn't take long-term vision to realize that.
Hey, David, could you just hold off 1 second, because you have something that's relevant to what we're talking
Sure, I just wanted to weigh in with the general time frames and say how great it is to hear the sort of overall conversation, and maybe we can talk more detail about everything said. The general time frames that we're trying to lay out in the plan are 0 to 3 years for short term, 2 to 4 for medium term, or I'm sorry for, am I getting that right? It's 4.
0 to 5 for short term, 4 to 15 for medium term, and 10 to 20 for long term.
Right, and that's in the very last page of the plan, so I'm sorry that was missed, but it's back by the acronyms.
about. Oh, okay. Okay, David, and then Larry.
Well, I work with the Green Economy Working Group, which we didn't hear a report on. Ruth Kaplan, Steve Soiso, unfortunately, are not here. One of our top priorities was the DC Public Bank, following the model of North Dakota. And when we had the plenary at UDC, that was very high up. And that was watered down in the final report to a revolving loan fund. Frankly, I find a lot of the objectives pathetic. 50% reduction in unemployment in 20 years from now, 50% reduction. It's pathetic. These goals, we should have been much more proactive and much more aggressive. And if you don't reach it, we don't reach it, but set a goal, a vision that I think the participants in the Sustainable DC were really on board with that, and it's not reflected in the report. And I'll just mention a couple of other things.
Just mention
Greenhouse
one other
gas-
thing. And then I-
Yeah, okay. Renewables 50%. We could do better than that. And I just want to make a final point. The DC self-declared itself as a human rights city in December 2008. And it's the equity part of this is again pathetic. Race is left out of the report. If you look at the PDF, they talk about poverty rate being 49.9%, but that's black children. Black children, half black children live in poverty. That race is left out, and so the structural racism that's part of our political economy is not dealt with. And that, I think, is a very serious defect that we have to address. And finally, Steve Soiso was going to raise this. I would like to see the working groups. Oh, were you here? Okay, I'll shut up.
I was going to call on him, in fact, I was going to call on him even if he didn't raise his hand, but let's go to Larry first.
I'll be pretty quick too. Yeah, I could agree with my colleague, Dr. Korsman here about the pathetic nature of some of these objectives. But I think that they all represent, with maybe the exception of the incineration plan, reasonable steps forward, progress. Now, maybe we don't want to wait until 2032 for all of these things, and we can do them a lot sooner. I think what's missing with the plan is implementation, as Joe was pointing out with respect to energy. We don't really have a clear path of implementation. We have some goals now, and that's great. It's a start. I think we all need to commit ourselves to getting involved in some way in oversight, accountability, and implementation of these steps, and push it as hard as possible. It's a toehold. It's a start. It's something that we can hold up and hold some of our electeds accountable for. I know Hana didn't mention she chairs the Zero Waste Committee at Sierra Club, and we do plan on doing just that. We're going to push for zero waste, and it's not going to be through waste energy either. It's going to be through waste diversion and recycling. I think we can all find a place to plug into some kind of an accountability process, some kind of an implementation process. And we need to make ourselves known downtown, in the city council, the mayor's office, and the implementation agencies.
Excellent.
Thanks again to the speakers.
This is very quick. This is about short term, not long term. There are two things that I mentioned, and then you all can chew them up. the two ladies involved with water, etc. I never heard storm water runoff. I happen to have gone to Mayor Marion Barry's meeting 10 years ago about how we'd have to do something about stormwater runoff. The whole story. Everybody knows that. I don't want to explain it. And he said, okay, it's going to cost us $2 billion, and it'll be done by, maybe 2000. Okay, nothing. No. Oh, we're doing it, but we're not. Well, anyway, I made the point. Something wrong there, and inexcusable. The other something wrong, transportation. Purple line is not mentioned. Now, everybody knows if you've lived in any city that a circular line cuts the transportation to work in half and the energy. I mean, you can't just put it aside, but it's not mentioned. Okay.
Stella. And then Steve.
I'll pass.
Okay, Steve. But remember us to keep it short.
Yeah, two main points. So I just want to talk briefly about the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development's 5-year strategy, which was released in January before this. And I would say it completely obliterates any economic development goals that are included in the Sustainable DC, which I feel should be the pillar that is driving this thing forward. And when I questioned Victor Hoskins, who's the Deputy Mayor, about the relationship between the city's economic development plan, which to me looks like something from the 1960s or 1950s. It's just very traditional, by the book, real estate development. You know, if you heard it in 1960, we just changed the industries.
That's right. It's really fast.
So the driver of all of this, I feel, is really the green economy, and the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development completely doesn't get it. So these silos, that has to be fundamentally addressed at the city level if we're really going to move this thing forward. And he put that off on DDOE and Office of Planning. Like, Sustainable DC is their ballywick, and don't bother me about it. And the second thing I want to do is just follow up on what a couple of other people are raising, including Larry just now, about we really need to follow up on this. I mean, there may be national groups that are already doing things in these various, following up in the 9 working groups. But if not, let's continue the working groups in some way, shape, or form, so that, like many of us in the private sector are already implementing some of these goals, whether or not they're in the final Sustainable DC plan, but it's not something the city's going to implement, it's on us. So if we're going to be doing it, let's continue working together. And I have some ideas about how we can continue that. We can do legislative things, we can do project-related things, we can do programmatic things, we can share resources across organizations. But I feel like we really need to continue the working groups. And I guess my main group was probably the green economy working group, but I was in a couple others. And I would be happy to take the lead on that. But we need ideas, I feel, for all 9 working groups, and we need to keep pushing. Like, it doesn't end with the city. I mean, it's really more on us than it is the city. So let's get going.
And I think it's all Kara. Go ahead.
Yeah, just following up on Steve's point, I think, a lot of our conversation in the working groups, we had a private sector representative and a government sector representative for all of them. And a lot of us sort of started giving advice to the government about what we wanted them to do, and kind of forgot that there's a lot of stuff that we can do on our own. So I would say I'm working with a couple of different neighborhood groups in my area. The plan gives us a lot of action items that are doable by ourselves. No government support whatsoever. We can just start tracking things out in our neighborhoods and activating citizens around them. So if you want to coordinate your own neighborhoods, talk to me.
Wait, let's panelist here.
I was going to say, I mean, it's been interesting because I think that a lot of us were hoping that this would come with, some funding behind it, and what I'm finding is that, at least in the food community, we're very networked to each other. We're working towards these goals. I mean, half of these goals, I feel like, they're just like, we said what we were doing, and they said, great, that's what we want the city to be. And I mean, I've even had conversations with people at the Office of the State Superintendent of Education where, I'll be saying something, and they're like, that's great, well, we're one city, right? Mayor's plan, we're one city, which to me is like, well, you guys are going ahead and doing it, so the city can say we're doing it. And I think it's a complicated moment. I agree with all of that, and I think we should be in step, but I want to make sure that it's not just the city kind of kicking it back to us. I mean, it's great to have this baseline, and it's great to have something to point to, and it's great when I go to city council, I can say, hey, you know what, incentive plans are in the mayor's sustainability plan, we want it in the budget, you know, but at the same time, yeah, I mean, I think that we're in this moment of kind of soul searching around what that real relationship is.
And then you, and then David's after one.
Yeah. Which you?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Several comments. One, there was no emphasis on perhaps streamlining permitting for solar energy. And in Germany, there is no permitting whatsoever. I think that that is a very simple concept that would radically change the renewable energy structure. Another, the possibility of extending PACE to residential. You know, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the overseeing organization, basically say that they want to preclude that. Simple technique to get around that would be to say, you know, open it up to residential if you have a big chunk of equity in your house, and take a second mortgage type claim if they do go into foreclosure, which is about zero probability. So, you know, basically about, you know, at least half of residential housing could be opened up with that. Third thing I didn't hear mentioned, the passive house standard out of Germany largely. Massive change in the energy efficiency of built infrastructure. I didn't hear any mention of that. And it's something I think should very much be folded into the plan. Thank you.
Okay, David.
Anne mentioned the word integration or lack of it in her view. And it struck me in reading the water section, it never mentions the fact that we got a $1 billion plus project now under construction to reduce those sewer overflows into the Anacostia River, and it's costing water users in the district an arm and a leg, and it's going to cost more. And that's a very important piece of it. But then I heard Joe talk about what GSA is already doing, and I hear what the food committee, to my way of thinking, whether you're an elected official like our mayor, or an advocate for environmental progress and improvement like the people in this room, integration of the past, the present, and the future, integration across media, all of this is going to be critical to us to be effective and to talk in language that other people in town can understand. I want to give you one example for the future, transportation. We absolutely need an effective transportation network of all kinds, and that talks a lot of hard surface. Right? 25% of the land in D.C. is roads, streets, sidewalks, alleys, etc. Okay? That's a tremendous challenge. One, on the technology side. Only last week, DDOT put out its proposed standards for low-impact development in the right-of-way. Big step forward, long way to go. And it's a question of cost. When DC Water charges for that $1 billion project, it's not charging anything extra, it's not charging anything for that impervious right-of-way, the runoff it causes, the contribution of the rainwater to the overflows, right? And it says, well, it would come from a different, you know, the city would have to pay for it, so it would come for us as taxpayers. But it's not quite true. An imaginative project for us to think about forward is how can we see to it that the users of transportation, which are largely the commuters, the users of transportation who need all that hard surface, pay for the incidental costs and runoff that affect our waterways.
Thank you. Go ahead.
One of the issues that came up in many, if not all, of the working groups was education and outreach. How do we get this message to the larger community, 600,000 residents? One of the top 5 goals that came out of, or action steps that came out of the energy group was setting up sustainable DC offices in each ward of the district so that you can tailor the sustainable DC message to the specific needs of each ward. A good example of this is Bethesda Green. They started 5-6 years ago with a budget of $25,000. Now their budget, primarily through in-kind donations, is more than $1 million, primarily green businesses. Why can't we do something like this in the district? We could do this for less than what they're planning to spend on the waste to energy study.